have my dear friend Melanie Sarakatsannis, soprano extraordinaire, who we are honored to have with us today.
Hi, how are you? It's so great to be
I have a
here.
few questions to ask you about your career.
I grew up in a very musical family, meaning my father was a concert pianist,
Hmm.
composer, university professor. So, I grew up with piano concertos, Rachmaninoff,
Yeah, wow.
Tchaikovsky, Chopin. That's all I ever really heard growing up.
Wow.
I would just sit and play my parents' opera records, like toddler age. They had pictures of me sitting next to, back in our childhood, we had those
Mhm.
ginormous stereo consoles, and I would sit there sucking my thumb. So I'm talking really young, like
Yeah,
4, and
unreal.
listening to the greats like Eileen Farrell and, Anna Moffo. That's
Wow.
who I grew up listening to.
Hmm.
Um, so, and then I started with piano lessons. I think my first opera that I saw was Carmen. Um, it was Cincinnati Opera, and it was, this is very interesting. It was in the zoo.
What?
They had I know. So the Cincinnati Opera had a summer series. Every summer they would perform. I don't remember how many operas it was because I was young. I was probably like fifth grade. Or Michaela, you're hearing, the elephants, and you're very interesting. But that got me hooked.
Mm.
But I was also hooked on ballet. So,
Really?
yes, I also studied ballet through the Cincinnati Ballet Company's preparatory department. So,
Mm.
from the age of 12 to 18, I was doing 3 to 4 ballet classes a week. I had two different careers that I was trying to hold on to. I wanted to be a ballerina.
Me
But
too.
obviously, I didn't become a ballerina. It helped with stage movement. So I just wanted to throw that
Absolutely.
out there. I just wanted to
Sure.
throw that out there.
You said that you were taking voice lessons. Who was that with?
Growing up from the age of 12 to 18, I took with a woman named Harriet Beebe. She sang a fair amount in Europe, in Germany. She was a college professor when I studied with her.
Wow.
And she took me on at 12. So,
Wow. Wow.
yeah,
That's a sensitive age. Let's start with high school. Did you do it with the shows?
was never given any leading roles. I did, however, dance Lori in the Dream Ballet in Oklahoma because I was
Wow.
the ballerina. But that was my dream at that point, was to be able to sing Lori and dance Lori. So I only got half my dream, which is fine.
College. Where did you do your undergraduate work?
So I did my first year of undergrad, which you may not know, or maybe you do know, at the University of Guam.
I did not know that.
Yes. So by the time I became a senior in high school, my dad took a job at the University of Guam's Department of Music
Wow.
to get the music department going.
Hmm.
He was a bit of a pioneer that way. So we moved to Guam my senior year, but I stayed back to finish my senior year. But my dad, my one brother, was already there.
Mhm.
So by the time I graduated high school, I went straight to the University of Guam. So there
Okay.
wasn't that kind of a culture shock, but people were very welcoming. And uh, this is what, this is where my career got into my brain, that I could do this. I moved to the island of Guam, having never sung a role in my high school, right? Like a
Right.
leading role, right? And my dad was conducting West Side Story,
Oh.
conducting the orchestra, right? And he said, "You need to audition for Maria." And I said, "How's that going to look? You're the conductor." And then the conductor's daughter, who just arrives on the island, auditions. He goes, "Trust me, you need to audition." So, I got the role. And then I realized I can do this because I didn't have a lot of confidence in high school, I'll be honest.
Where did that take you? I obviously that gave you
Right.
that you got bit.
So after my first year at the University of Guam, back to my high school voice teacher, university professor, she said, "We need to get Melanie back to the States." And this is all she said, she will go to Indiana University, Jacobs School of
Sure.
Music, right? She will go to IU and she will study with my teacher there. Honestly, I had no idea what IU was at the time. I didn't
Right.
know. We all know what IU is, right?
Yes.
I didn't. I'm sure my dad did, but I'm sure he didn't want to tell me at the time. Okay, I just did what I was told. I'm like, okay, I'm transferring to IU, 8,000 miles away from mom and dad on this little island. You're going to IU. And I said, okay. And I did.
And who did you study with there?
I studied I had, I guess the best teacher I had was Lynn Luciano. She is the one that truly gave me the confidence to move forward,
Mhm.
to really believe in myself, which is really hard for young singers, I think.
Absolutely. That's why we're doing masterclass. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Because my experience consisted of Maria, Grace Farrell, and Annie on the island of Guam. I also did Mary Magdalene in Jesus Christ Superstar in the
Really?
Philippines. In the Philippines. So these were my three roles that I came armed with opera school, right?
Right.
So now I was learning, my 24 Italian arias. I've been learning those since I was 12.
Right. Yeah.
And I was also listening to a lot of opera singers, but I was incredibly green compared to the students that I,
Right.
out
Hmm.
into the world, right? But I think so. I had another teacher before Miss Luciano, and she was trying, and I knew there was a red flag when she said, "You might be a mezzo. You've known me for 100 years."
Hmm. No way.
Exactly. So, anyway, so I knew that that wasn't right. And it wasn't until I switched studios when she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I was just doing what I was told." So she said, "No, you're not a mezzo." So she put me onto Mozart,
Excellent. Yeah.
Handel, where my voice naturally.
Lived, sure. See, now let me, I want to focus a little bit on that because, see, now you're a young student, you're taking the advice of a professional, but your instincts as a person and as a musician and as a future singer knew that that wasn't right.
Right.
So, the hair on my arm stands up, and, because your gut feeling,
Oh, yeah.
you know your voice, you know what's right. You don't have to be Luciano Pavarotti to know that there's something that doesn't just work. So your instinct is so important at that point because you could have taken a wrong road.
Yes.
So trust your instincts. That's the first lesson. Okay, had to get that point through.
Yeah.
Now you go through. Now you're singing.
So my first role was my senior year at IU, Susanna in Le Nozze di Figaro. Now, keep in mind, no undergrads get leading roles.
Right.
So that was talk about
Mm.
no, that was huge. I never saw that coming. I mean, I was really blown away. I had the most wonderful time doing that. So that was my first role. And then going forward, I decided after I graduated to stay, do my master's.
Good.
You're kind of required to teach,
Yes.
with the whole scholarship thing. So I got the full scholarship. I taught, and then I ended up doing Pamina, Despina. I did
Beautiful.
Hero. In Beatrice and Benedict. I did, so much opportunity at
Sure.
that university because it's so big.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So now you've gotten through this. Now you have opera experience, and you're getting ready to embark on your career. Did you get swallowed up right away from your IU experience and went to work, or did you have to still iron a few things out before you got your first job?
I no sooner graduate and I move home. And where else are you going to go? I don't have
Sure.
any money, right? So I move home. And at that point, my parents had moved back to the mainland. They settled in Sarasota, Florida. I move home to Sarasota and I'm like, I need to make money, some kind of money. So I go, okay, I have no, I'm not embarrassed to say this. I had a job at Kmart. You have to do what you have to do. Now, it's not like I was living on the streets, but I still was not just going to live.
You need money. Right.
You need money, right? So, and also while I was in graduate school, I also worked at Kmart. So I was like, you know what? This is an easy job. I know the routine. I can work at Kmart in Indiana. I can work at Kmart in Florida. So I went to Kmart and the guy was like, "Why do you want to work here?" Because he knew I just received a master's in music.
Right.
I said, "I need a job."
Sure.
I said, "Keep in mind, I am auditioning, so I don't know how long I'll be here." Fine. So I worked at Kmart for the summer. In the meantime, I was auditioning, and I auditioned for the Orlando Opera's resident artist program.
Mhm.
And that was my first job, and I stayed there for 2 years.
Wow.
Had a
Good
ball.
for you.
I
Yeah,
had a
I'm
ball.
sure.
Then I was no longer living at home. I was only home for that summer, and then they housed you, and we did all these tours of a children's opera. Every
Mhm.
morning you're in a different school, two schools a day. I'm sure you know
Wow.
the routine
Yeah, I
job.
sure do.
So I did that, and then we did some small roles on the main stage. And for
Mhm.
2 years, I was able to just, stay there and coach
Coach.
arias, do lots of performances
Hmm.
outside of just the children's opera performances. We did other concerts and
Sure.
things as the resident artist
Hmm.
representing the opera company. I would, fly up to Indiana to see
Hmm.
my teacher, Signora Luciano, from time to time. I'm like, can you coach me on this? Or can you?
Hmm.
I would coach though when I was with Orlando Opera with Robin Jensen, who I
Uh-huh.
still down there.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah. So that's I would coach with her, and she's a fabulous coach.
She is.
Thankfully, as a resident artist, you get all of these types of things. I don't know how it is now. With do they give you voice lessons as well? I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, but coaching, yes. So that's how it.
Yeah. Well, you're singing every day, so that's a good
Yeah.
thing. I don't mean to embarrass you about this, but you were always a fine singer. You knew your voice. You sang really well from an early age, as far as I remember, and you really sang well. Now, you come out of Orlando Opera. What do you do?
I did end up getting married while I was at Orlando Opera to a baritone,
Yeah.
bass baritone.
And a
Um,
good one at that.
and funny enough, they had an opening for a bass baritone
Oh,
in the
great.
resident artist program. So he came in about halfway through my first year there, and then we were
Mhm.
there, together for the rest of that year and a half, so 2 years total. So then we were like, all right, now what are we doing? So I believe the head of Virginia Opera was in Orlando and heard us do
Mhm.
something, and I can't remember what performance we were doing, and he said we need a soprano and a bass in our resident artist program.
Wow.
We're doing I think it was Little Red Riding Hood. It's another really
Mhm.
cute children's opera.
Yeah.
And do you want to come to Virginia? My husband and I literally didn't have a home. We weren't paying rent, right? We just were living off opera. So
Oh,
then
the
we
opera company, right?
yeah. So then we just moved to Virginia.
Professional career started at Embark. What were you hired to do? What were your signature
Uh,
stuff?
well, so my first I think the first time I did Papagena was with Orlando Opera. No. Yes, I was a resident artist, and they hired me for Papagena. Then, now I'm through Orlando Opera. My first professional gig, meaning, ACAT.
Outside. Hmm.
I'm not a resident artist. Was at Palm Beach Opera, Papagena, and that subsequently led them to bringing me back for Despina in Così fan tutte in the
Excellent.
ACAT as well,
Wow.
which was a little frightening because back then, I don't know how Palm Beach does it now, but back then they always had two casts, A cast, B cast.
Mhm.
A cast, they were a very international company. So A cast usually didn't speak English.
Really?
So I was with a slew, Fiordiligi Dorabella, they were all from Italy. And then there was me, Despina. I was never fluent in Italian. To this day, I'm not fluent in Italian. I
Wow.
can sing in all my languages.
Sure.
I'm not fluent. So that was a little frightening. So I ended up just hanging out with the B cast because they were all, the American
Americans. Sure.
singers.
What year or how long of a span was that before we met at Chautauqua? Which I don't want to mention the year, but I
Literally
get
right after.
it was right after.
Not
Okay.
when you and I were at Chautauqua.
Yeah.
I was an apprentice, but I was
Yeah.
cast as the lead in a Chekhov trilogy by Richard.
That's right. Yes. 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 Yes.
I
Yes.
was
Yes.
the
Yes.
lead in the second one,
Right.
to the country.
Right.
Dottie
Okay.
Banner was the
Yes. 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 I
so yeah,
remember.
I was an apprentice with a lead role.
We had Linda Jackson, and we had
Oh yeah.
Gary, and it's a slew of people that came. Gately, David Gately, so on
Oh
and so
yeah.
forth. So after Chautauqua, which was what 9 weeks or some, it felt like forever. What was life like after Chautauqua?
Chautauqua.
Because let me stop you there before you start, because you had a phenomenal summer season there. You sang brilliantly, and if I remember correctly, they gave a grant to you because out of all the apprentices that they picked somebody to get this particular grant, and I remember that you got it, and you deserved
Grant
it.
helped me a lot. It helped me with travel. It helped me with voice coachings,
Mhm.
etc., etc. So that was huge. So after Chautauqua, I was like, I did an apprenticeship, and I really enjoyed that apprenticeship. Mainly because it wasn't just chorus; it was an actual role. It was a
Yes.
real role with other leading, like Jane Shawless of the Met.
Yes.
I mean, I was singing with real singers. So I continued to audition for other young artist programs. You know, my goal was always to go to Santa Fe.
Mhm.
I loved the whole idea of Santa Fe because yes, you do chorus, you do, but you also understudy roles,
Right.
nice size roles, and I wanted that experience. I just wanted to be in that company because they hire the most amazing singers there. And the other reason I wanted to sing there was because the house wasn't that big.
Mhm.
So, one thing I always tell students, know your voice, know the size of your voice. And Santa Fe is not a huge house,
Right.
so I didn't have a problem singing there. I didn't feel like I needed to push.
Mhm.
So that was one of the reasons I really wanted to sing there, because I was like, I know this house will fit my voice. First year, I was bridesmaid number one in Le Nozze di Figaro with bridesmaid number two, Joyce Di Donato.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I just adore her. And she and I had so much fun. We went on to do other gigs, like we did a Mozart C minor mass together with the Virginia Symphony. I think we even did a Messiah together. So you never know who you're going to meet, and it's
Exactly.
is when you do sing with someone like that, and they're incredibly talented. And then now I think back, oh my God, look who she is today. And I used to tell her back then, you do realize, Joycey, you're going to be famous.
So, what are the roles that you have done that you would say would be your signature roles?
Um,
And you can include oratorio also, because I think that
yeah,
oratorio sometimes is a lot harder than opera because it's a full sing.
yeah, it is a full sing. And I ended up doing, at one point I realized I'm singing more oratorio than opera now. Oratorio, as much as I love opera.
Mhm.
Um, Despina was a role, like I said, I sang that a lot, but there was a role that I did at Santa Fe, my one of my apprentice years there. I was what they call a third year apprentice artist, because back in the day, I don't know if it's like this now, you can only do 2 years of apprenticeships in
Mhm.
whatever companies you
Mhm.
choose. So I did my first year at Chautauqua, second year at Santa Fe, and then they wanted to bring me back the following year, but I'm like, I've already done my two, I'm gone,
Right.
right? And they said, oh, we have a special program, so to speak, for a
Nice.
third year artist, and I'm like, great. So this is a role that I created in their world premiere called Emmeline. Mine was sung by Patricia Rissette. And then I was her understudy. So I got to learn her part, which is just an incredible piece of music. It was Tobias Picker's, I believe it was his first opera he ever wrote. And it is
Really.
stunning. It's a stunning opera. So I sang there was another soprano part. She's one of the friends of Emmeline. Her name is Sophie. So I got to do
Mhm.
quite a bit of work in that opera, singing a lot with Patricia as well. A very hard sing. That music's not easy.
No, it's not.
Things, and then we ended up taking that whole production that we had done at Santa Fe to the
Mhm.
New York City Opera. George Manahan conducting. It was just a
Mm.
fabulous experience at New York City Opera.
You had one performance to say, and it could be anything,
Hmm.
where when you were walking off the stage, you knew that that was the most magical moment, and you were walking 4 foot off the ground as you were walking off. What would be that performance?
So remember, I said people need to know their voice and know their fach, right? So there's one gentleman in my career who always heard me in a little bit heavier rep because his house was very small. And that man is Dr. Robert Larson. Everyone knows Dr. Larson,
Yep,
right? Everyone
absolutely.
knows. So he loved me in a little bit heavier rep. Des Moines Metro Opera only has 500 seats.
Right.
It's a house in the round. Now, I also did, before I did Chautauqua and before I did Santa Fe, I did an apprenticeship with the Des Moines Metro Opera.
Hmm.
And that opera, because I think, or that apprenticeship, because I think it was at the time, it was not AGMA. It didn't count towards your apprenticeship. So I went there basically because he wanted me to understudy Violetta in La Traviata. And my teacher was like, wow, I can see why, because his house is small, and I've always had a little bit of a darker quality in my
Yes.
voice than like most Susannas and Despinas.
Mhm.
So he always heard me in these heavier roles. So now let's jump ahead several years. He hired me to sing Magda in La Rondine. That is
Wow.
the part that no one would ever cast me in. I have to be honest. That's a big
Really?
thing. It's
Yes.
Puccini. No one has ever asked me. My agent never put me up for that. But Dr. Larson wanted to hear me in that. So he had already auditioned. I think he auditioned everyone and then went to one of the coaches from the company and said, I want to hear Melanie in this. So I had never sung anything from it. I'm not even sure I'd sung, the big aria,
Right.
Qu'il bel sogno. And I was contacted, and my agent's like, he really wants to hear you in this. Can you learn, the big aria, Cuba Sonia? But then I had to learn the other, I remember the other name of the aria. And my coach here in Philly put it all together. I went to New York, sang it, and then it was recorded because Dr. Larson, he was already home, right?
Mhm.
He was done with the auditions. He just wasn't happy, I guess. And then they sent a recording of me, and I got hired. I got so much into that role. And I think, I'll be honest, like I said, I grew up listening to Eileen Farrell,
Sure.
those big roles that she sang.
Yes.
I kept thinking, oh, I would love to sing like that. Well, I will never sing like that, you know, but I can sing with my voice in
Sure.
my
In that music, right.
house, Puccini. And so that was one of those roles where I walked off stage and said, ah, that
Right.
was satisfying.
There you go.
That was
Not only are we friends, always a fan.
fun.
I love the way you sing. I love your ideas of singing. To say that you had, um, which at the time I didn't, and it took me a while after Chautauqua that you had the package that I really actually yeah, the voice all blah 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 blah, but you had the package and you really were special. I mean, I have to say that your voice, you were a wonderful actress. You knew your music. You were a good, great on stage actually. Um,
Thank you.
if you had to tell a young singer a message through your experience, what would that message be for somebody who's just going into or just finished college and going into the professional or apprentice program world? What would you tell them?
Um, I said this before, know your voice, know your own voice, know your
There you
capabilities, right?
go. Mhm.
Don't let anybody push you. Um, no, be comfortable in your own skin because the one thing no one ever told me is that you're alone a lot
Yes.
in this career. You're flying alone to your next gig, you're in your hotel room alone, you're eating your dinner alone, you're always
Yes.
alone until
Yes.
you're with your cast, of course, but you have to be comfortable in your own skin. You
Yeah.
really do. And don't be afraid to say no to a gig. It's okay to say no.
Yes. In closing, I have to say, Melanie, thank you for being a friend for all these years, an inspirational singer. First day I heard you, I said, a big wow. I want to thank you for being a part of Masterclass and imparting your wisdom, spot on comments of singing to these young singers. And, I love you to death.
Love
So,
you too, John. It was my pleasure.
it's my pleasure. Give Michael a kiss for me. And I wish you all the best.
Okay, thank you.
I'll see you
Bye.
soon. Bye bye. Today, we have legendary bass baritone John Cheek with us. We are fortunate not only to have him as a masterclass panelist, but I am very fortunate to know him as a friend. John, well, where did you grow up?
The short answer is I grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina. I arrived there by age 3, I think.
Okay.
Actually, I was born in Greenville, South Carolina, and my parents moved around a little bit in Carolina, which
Hmm.
was a lovely place to grow up at the time in many ways. The beach was a mere 7 miles away. It was the 50s, so
Best
that's
time around. Yes. Were your parents, were they musical at all?
not really. My parents were both language teachers, French and Spanish. And my father did have aspirations for the stage. He attended UNC Chapel Hill and was a member of the Carolina Playmakers. But then he went off to war. He was a translator for the Free French and spent 3 years in North Africa and Paris. Was
Wow.
awarded the Croix de Guerre.
Wow.
Yes.
That's quite impressive.
And he ended up as a school principal, and my mother as dean of students at what is now the University of North Carolina at Wilmington.
Wow. What drew you to music?
Well, I have memories of a few recordings at home that my parents listened to classical music from time
Mhm.
to time. We had a hi-fi. We had Prokofiev, Peter and the Wolf, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and perhaps most importantly, the cast album of South Pacific on 78s.
Wow.
And and of course I remember that Some Enchanted Evening, which was incomparable, especially the way he would let her go with this perfect
Oh,
on the high E, which I tried all my life to.
got goosebumps just thinking of it. Wow. Um, so, what was your first musical endeavor or first formal music training?
I played the piano,
Okay.
never terribly well, but I enjoyed it, and it was a means of expression for me. Then on the totally opposite end of the musical spectrum, I played the flute in high school, and the piccolo too, which I found
Wow.
easy to carry. And somewhere in my junior year in high school, I went off to a band camp
Okay.
at East Carolina College, and we were encouraged to have a minor. So I went and sang for the chorus guy, and he says, "Boy, you have a great voice. You should study." So that was my senior year in high school. I started taking voice lessons, but it was just like love at first sight.
Wow.
It was after a certain point, even my senior year in high school, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. Of course, I really didn't have the faintest idea, what was involved in all of that. It was the second year of what is now called the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. It was only North Carolina School of the Arts in my day.
Uh-huh.
It was the first state-supported conservatory for all the performing arts, dance, drama, music, technical theater,
Oh,
in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. It had been started by a triumvirate, including the composer Vittorio Giannini, who was the first
right.
president, uh, and the then governor and later Senator Terry Sanford, and wealthy people in Winston Salem who made it all happen.
Wow.
And they had wonderful teachers. My first teacher was Norman Farrow, who was Canadian with the Bach Aria group. Rose Bampton also flew in to teach.
Wow.
Another great,
Yeah.
and many others came later. But the first opera I ever really saw or I was in, because I didn't, I don't think I even knew about the Met Saturday broadcast.
Really? Wow. That's interesting.
But we did a workshop of the fourth act of Bohème, and then I did a wonderful production of Cosi, directed by Duncan Noble, who was a wonderful, had been a dancer on Broadway, and who was a marvelous director.
Mhm.
It gave me the feeling that I wasn't alone. I felt like a lot of people in the arts in high school, geeky, and I wasn't
Yeah.
popular, and it was not a happy experience. I guess a lot of people's high school experience isn't happy, but I feel like mine was particularly unhappy, and I felt like I really came into my own in college. And the other wonderful thing we had was a summer session in Siena, Italy.
Oh,
And I went 3 years, 1968, 69, and 70. And in 1969, I studied at the Accademia Musicale Chigiana with the great baritone Gino Becchi.
yes. Wow.
But I learned, practiced my Italian and
Mhm.
fell in love with all things Italian, food, coffee, wine, etc., etc. It was a great formative experience for me.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So now you're in the conservatory, um, or college, and you've had now with this introduction to Italians, which probably was shocking to begin with. Well, at least South Philadelphia Italians, anyway.
Yeah.
So how did you get into your first professional job, or were you drafted first?
Well, yes. I finished my bachelor's degree at NCSA,
Hmm.
and I went to New York. I was at Manhattan School of Music for a year, attempting to do my master's in opera performance. And about midway in the year, I got a draft notice because my last year in college, I got a low, well, not, or let's say not high enough lottery number. It was the first year of the lottery.
Wow.
153 or something like that. So I knew it was coming, but it was rather devastating. And
Sure.
a colleague of mine there at Manhattan, who had been in the Army chorus, told me about it, gave me all the information. I went down, auditioned for them. I was accepted, and I was given an enlistment guarantee. And that summer, I did the 2-month basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, in
Wow.
July and August, which was particularly nasty. And then I arrived shortly after to our post at Fort Myer, Virginia, just across from Arlington Cemetery.
Hmm.
And it was a pretty nice gig. We were given very quickly the rank of E6. That's the equivalent of staff sergeant. We lived off post. Many of us had church and temple jobs,
Wow.
which I did, and I also was able to take leave. And getting back to your question about first performances, I did 2 performances with what was then known as the Opera Society of Washington.
Wow.
One was Fiorello in Il Barbiere di Siviglia, and the other was the Second Soldier in Salome. And the interesting, the Barbiere had 2 up-and-coming Rosinas, Federica von Stade and Maria.
Oh,
It was good company. Through a wonderful conductor of the Choral Arts Society in Washington, Norman Scribner, did my first couple of performances with him. And he also helped me obtain my first manager
okay.
at the Becker Agency,
Right. Right.
the late Larry Wasserman.
Wow. You worked in the field with, not only are you a great singer, but well-known, established, big name people. What was that feeling like?
Well, it was pretty terrifying because, well, to finish the bit of
Please.
autobiography, I spent 4 years with the Army Chorus.
Right. Hmm.
Sang for Richard Nixon, The Road to Mandalay, which was my big solo, which Nixon always requested. I moved immediately to New York City. By that point, I had a manager, but of course, no work.
Mm-hmm. How old were you at this time?
Let's see, 25.
Okay.
And by age 27, I made my Met debut, which was, of course, absolutely nuts. I really did not have much experience,
Mm-hmm.
but I auditioned for the company and then for Levine, and they took me, and it probably would have been something like the Lindenman Young Artist Program, except no such program existed
At that time, right?
So I sang, well, my debut was Ferrando in il Trovatore,
Wow.
pretty decent sized supporting role.
Yeah.
And that was on tour at Wolf Trap, and the cast included Carlo Bergonzi, Renata Scotto, and Cornell McNeil, with Levine conducting. So talking about greats.
Yes.
That first year, I also was in a production of Bartered Bride with Teresa Stratas.
Another great.
All-time, great singers.
Absolutely.
John Vickers as the stuttering Vashek.
Oh.
And Gedda, as the lover. So phenomenal singers. And I thought, I was young. I thought, oh, well, this is the way it's always going to be. It's the Met. They have the greatest singers, but there are certainly good singers around now. But the level of that, the people that I sang with. I also sang the Trovatore with Leontine Price. I did a Verdi Requiem with her.
Yes, I remember that. Yes, that I remember.
all
For
the
27 years old, I mean, Lord, that's almost unfathomable. You have at 27, I was trying to remember how to spell my name, for goodness sakes. Granted, your talent actually warranted that kind of position. What did it feel like? I mean, to witness that artistry and stand side by side with singers of that caliber. I mean, did it just feel natural, or was it intimidating? How did that feel?
Well, a bit of all of that, really. I mean,
Mhm.
certainly, I remember every time I walked in the stage door, I was like, what the hell am I doing here? And I felt that awesome responsibility, and then really did, all through, 35 years or so there, but particularly in those young days. Uh, and, hearing those voices,
Sure.
the sheer beauty, the size. I mean, standing next to Cornell McNeil, his voice was, like a battery of cannon.
True.
Also Jerome Hines, who I sang with, I did a small part in Peleas, the medicine of the physician.
Mm.
The
Yeah.
sound that was like, a cavern with vocal cords. And he also stood about 6'7" or
Who did you work with vocally at that time when
so.
you were
I really didn't. That's the
really?
really weird thing. I did a lot of coaching, with various people, Alberto Mazziello,
Huh?
Dornemann, uh, Walter Tausig,
Oh yeah.
a bunch of other people. Marguerite Meyer. No, she was a little later. Marguerite Meyerowitz. Uh, and in retrospect, I was in the groove, but I think I could have expanded in that groove, and instead I just kind of held on to it. So maybe that
Okay.
was not the greatest idea. I did have a few little minor vocal crises, and I took a couple of lessons with Margaret Harshaw, but this was in like early '80s.
Wow. Yeah, another
It was
big
very
name.
helpful.
From a natural singing standpoint, what did you feel that was part of the puzzle that wasn't there when you were singing? What was that? Do you remember what it was back then?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I was around all these huge voices, and my
Sure.
voice, was not, never has been huge. And maybe it didn't develop as much as it might have with the right guidance. What saved me was my voice was very focused, and I had brilliant top notes,
Yes.
a solid lower register, though not a particularly loud one. And I
Mhm.
ran into problems in some of the repertoire that I was basically assigned,
Uh,
like Vous Me, Louisa Miller, uh, which I sang with people like Leonucci and
mm, 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 mm.
Gautier Ricciarelli, Carreras, etc. And the middle register, I didn't have enough bite, and that's one thing that I think that I needed that I didn't get to keep from trying to oversing, what I have occasionally called faux butch, not
Yes.
my original term.
My favorite phrase.
Efforting,
Yes.
that's gonna, knocking your voice out of line and
Yeah.
basically doing the opposite of what you think it's going to do.
Yeah. What age do you feel that you actually got settled with all this? How old were you? Because listen, I say this 1,000 times, male voices develop later. Once you felt comfortable in that, in your skin and in your voice, um, what role would you say you sang that you just walked off to the wings and you just were like 4 feet in the air? What was that? What would that role have been?
Well, there have been a lot of Mozart. One that I might be playing later is Figaro in Note di Figaro. That fit me very well. It has a big range, but
Yeah.
it's slightly on the high side. And I was always bass baritone-ish.
Hmm.
Now, as I in my dotage here, I get my low register keeps opening up more and more.
As I heard, yes. How we met. If take a second, go back into it. We're going to skip around a little bit. I met you when you were doing William Penn.
Yes.
I was in that cast, and I was cast, but I never did the performance because I got a call to do a bohem, and I wherever it was, and I left. But I first met you doing this. Well, I have to tell the story how we got reconnected. I heard we were listening. I was listening. Josephine Salerno came to the house, and we were talking, and we brought up Cascarini, and I have a recording of that. I said, "Do you know I was supposed to sing that opera and I didn't?" So she played it, and I said, "That's John Cheek." So I listened, after everybody left, and I sat back, and I'm thinking of it now, and actually the goosebumps are raising. That was such a demanding role, and I have to tell you that I think I texted you or emailed you or messaged you or something. And I said, I don't know if you remember me, but I just listened to it again. And I said, holy Lord, it was beautiful. That was such a demand from top to bottom. That was not an easy role. I mean, how did you do that? I mean, still, when I think of it, I am absolutely blown away because the music was, listen, you had nobody to listen to, obviously, because you were it. But just the sheer technicality of from top to bottom, there wasn't one note in that recording that I could say, which I believe it was a live recording, if I'm not mistaken, was it was exquisite. It was some of the best singing I have ever heard. And I think right after that, I was on the phone and email and texting, and that's, I think, how we rekindled our relationship. His wife was in the cast also. Yes. My goodness. Yes, right. You're what played your wife, right? How did you find that music to sing? Was it satisfying? I mean, I know it was difficult. That's a given.
It was difficult. It was high ranging and went up to a G a couple of times, which was pretty much it for me. So I had my sometimes I had my fingers crossed, but when I was really in the groove then that I remember. And we had a good rehearsal period, so there was time to settle into it. But,
how old were you about at that time?
Well, let's see. That was 1981, I think. Something.
Yep.
So early 30s.
Right. Nobody that would ever compare to you with that. If you you said you talked about your Figaro, and how many times have you performed it, do you think?
60, 70 times, something like that.
A small amount. Yeah.
A huge number. Always seemed like, why am I learning all this new music? I should recycle some of the old music. There's a certain laziness in my character, but also a desire to perfect, because that was a role that I studied a lot and came back to regularly. So it felt like an old friend.
Yeah. How many performances have you done at the Met?
I think it was 370 or around that. Yeah.
That's quite a career. So you performed Figaro, obviously. That you said that you have a great identity to that role. What else? What other things have you done that you had a personal and emotional connection to?
Well, definitely Mephistopheles, the Boiso. I was. It's funny, when I was on tour with the Met, and there was a cancellation. We were in Boston, and there was a cancellation in Atlanta. Telarc was doing a recording with Robert Shaw of the prologue, and so I learned it in 3 days and flew down there and did the recording.
Wow!
But I did not do the whole role until several years later at New York City Opera. And that did you ever see that production? Man, what an incredible production that was.
Yes.
It always sold out.
Yeah.
Tremendously physically demanding. Put my big toe in the dress rehearsal and had to do all the performances in the first run with a broken toe, which is not just an amazing experience. And it really helped me get out of myself, because I had to do all sorts of crazy things. I only did it a few times, but Dutchman, I love Dutchman. There's this mystical characteristics to him that I really enjoyed. That incredible opening monologue, and then the duet with Zenta,
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
just amazing, amazing
Stunning.
music.
Yeah. Stunning music.
Somewhere between Donizetti and the Moon.
Right.
Other
In your singing, did you ever have a period where you thought you didn't want to do it anymore?
certainly, there were times when I was wearied of travel, but and
Yes.
and wearied of the grind of learning things. But I saw people burn out, and I thought, oh boy, that'll never really happen to me. And it didn't until I got into my early 60s, and by that point, it wasn't doing it for me.
Yeah.
So I mostly stayed in it. There were always good times and not so good times.
Sure.
Miserable experiences with a bad production and
Hmm.
not very nice people, to put it as
Yes.
diplomatically as possible.
I get it. Who was your go-to singer when you wanted to listen to in your repertoire?
Pinza, of course,
Hmm.
Siepi, later Ferruccio Furlanetto.
Yes. I just find some for some reason because of the music being always a little higher, everybody's tuning a little higher. We kind of lose that gorgeous bellowing sound that we were used to, especially like in the Pinza era, because everything was tuned a little lower, so you got that kind of roundness and richness especially in the lower voices. Um, what would you recommend for a singer to do once they have gotten out of that, and I use this term loosely, master's degree program, and they're going to start to embark on their own careers?
There's a more clearly defined path now with the young artist programs. The best thing for these young singers to do is to have a really good teacher and have a really, really solid technique and start to learn, the roles that you feel are right for you. Learn as much as you can about them, and workshops about audition technique. Done it quite a bit of here, and we've
Yes.
heard from people that really know what to look for.
Why is there such a void anymore? I just don't understand why.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I hate to blame the younger generation, but
Mhm.
I don't recall anyone telling me to go listen to singers. I just did it, and of course, in my day, have YouTube. We had to go to the library and put headphones on. Of course, I studied with one golden age baritone, Gino
Jimmy
Vecchi,
Becky. Mhm.
produced this sound that was like nothing I'd ever heard
Yeah.
at the time. I didn't have an encyclopedic knowledge of earlier generations of singers, but I did listen to
Hmm.
a lot of recordings. And of course, I did have the advantage that the current or near current generation of singers were still fantastic.
Yes.
And that's not so true now. There are some exceptions,
Hmm.
but it's undeniable that we don't have the quality, the operatic bench
Hmm.
that we did in those days.
The icons. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, we had singers that there were singers at the Met that were considered secondary that would be superstars today.
We used to go to school. We used to see somebody carrying a flute, violin, cello, but they don't have that.
Right.
It's not taught at home. It's not experienced at home. And I can honestly say, when I taught school for a short amount of time, I started at the college level and worked my way all the way down. In between, when I wasn't so sure that I wanted to continue with my singing. So, and I was fortunate that I can't tell you how many times that I took a class or a school to a theater, and it was their first time walking in the door.
Wow.
So I'm not. That's my take on it. That it's not introduced because you don't know if we're going to see another Mozart. You don't know if you're going to sing another Nat King Cole or an Ella Fitzgerald. You don't know if you're going to find another John Cheek sitting in a classroom someplace.
Definitely part of it. Lee and I, my wife, that's my wife, Lee and I were talking. She'd just been watching and is going to do a whole seminar for our Episcopal Diocese of Western Massachusetts on music in the Black Church, the series on PBS.
Uh-huh.
And it occurred to me that one thing with Henry Louis Gates, who's the host, that one thing that occurred to me that they did not mention in this series, which is a sad omission, is how many great opera singers were nurtured in that tradition. Most of my, African American colleagues, got their, start singing, in churches with spirituals and gospel music. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the emphasis now in singing is gotten so much to appearance, and you gotta be pretty, you gotta
HD,
you gotta be a Barry hunk, you gotta be able to take your shirt off and
Mm-hmm.
have everybody go wow.
Yeah.
And of course, there's been a huge epidemic of fat shaming that's just recently come out,
And what do you have prepared for us, John?
I would like to sing Non più andrai from Le nozze di Figaro.
Bravo, bravo, canto, canto.
This is from a performance in Japan with the Yomiuri Nippon Symphony, who also owned the Yomiuri Nippon Giants.
Non più avrai questi bei pennacchini, quel cappello leggero e gallante, quella piuma, quell'aria brillante, quel vermiglio nottesco color, quel vermiglio nottesco color. Non più avrai quei pennacchini, quel cappello, quella piuma, quell'aria brillante. Non potrai far favore amoroso, notte e giorno di corno girando, nelle belle corbaglia e riposo, narcisetto arancino d'amor. Nelle belle corbaglia e riposo, narcisetto arancino d'amor. Fra guerrieri paparracco, raggio sacco, stretto sacco, scopo in spalla, mano a fianco, collo dritto, uso franco, un gran casco, un gran turbante, molto onor, poco contante, poco contante, poco contante. Ed invece nel fantango una voce per il fango, per montagne e per valloni, con le neve e i solioni, falconi, di bombarde e di cannone, che le palle in tutti i cuori all'orecchio fan fischiar. Non dovrai quei pennacchini, non dovrai quel cappello, non dovrai quella chioma, non dovrai quell'aria brillante. Non potrai far favore amoroso, notte e giorno di torno girando, nelle belle turbando il riposo, narcisetto arancino d'amor. Nelle belle turbando il riposo, narcisetto arancino d'amor. Cielo vino alla vittoria, alla gioia militar. Cielo vino alla vittoria, alla gioia militar. Alla gioia militar, alla gioia militar.
Is why John Cheek is the artist he is. That is stunning. John, You know how I feel about you as a person, as a singer. You know, we've worked together, you know, and I had my problems and I tried to come back and do a little bit of singing. I call you because I honor your opinion. Have always been a fan of your singing. Our friendship is one that, and I feel that you know, we don't have to see each other for every day or every month or whenever, but you know the feeling is there, and I love you. You're a great man, and please give Lee a kiss from me.
Will
Um,
do.
and as soon as this crap is over, we're getting together.
Sounds
Now,
good to me.
John, thank you again. I'm honored. Believe me.
My pleasure.
Thank you,
Thank you.
John. Take care.